Hey, good afternoon and welcome to the Agora webinar. I am your host, Phil Khalil, and I'd like to introduce you to our special guests. They are the authors of My American Flight to Egypt, Thilo and Anastasia Young. Welcome.
All right,
Good to
Phil.
see you.
Hey, good to see you as well. So tell us about yourselves and what inspired you both to write this book.
you you inspired me, so go ahead. You start.
I don't, excuse me, I don't know if I'd call it inspiration.
Sure.
Just Father Michael Sorial was the first one when he'd heard our conversion story that said you should write a book years ago. And it always kind of rolled around there, and other people had said it. And I'd set out to try it a few times, and I would try and put an outline and a structure, and it wasn't working. And then I had heard about uh, just writing everything you think. Don't worry about the structure, and then come back later the second time and organize. And it actually worked, but it wasn't so much inspired as like this is something I should do. Like it was a hopefully a good thing to do.
And he inspired me. I told him no. I told him this is all on you. I have nothing to do with this. And he said, "This is your story too." And finally he convinced me to share my part of the story. And I'm glad because I feel like it it's interesting to look at the exact same story through two different perspectives.
Mhm.
And I'm hoping that that helps perhaps maybe couples, and I know we'll get into this later,
Yeah,
but
sure.
couples that are looking at Coptic Orthodoxy because men tend to think very differently than women, and so I think it was a good thing. I'm glad that he had me do that.
I
Okay.
don't think I inspired her so much as I insisted and bugged her until she finally gave in.
Yeah, pretty much.
You inspired and bugged each other. And that's how you got the book. That's awesome. So tell us about your journey and what about this ancient faith attracted you both to it?
It wasn't attraction. Um,
Okay.
and those who read the book will see that. It was a stumbling upon the concept of the voice of the church and Catholicity as a epistemological tool. So, being here in the West, of course, you have thousands of choices. We're in a consumerist America. And so if you think of it in terms of businesses competing for customers, offering something different than the other business, it all kind of makes sense why there's a church on every corner competing for the same people to come to their church. And with all these different claims of truth and all claiming theirs is the clear reading of scripture, it kind of, it always rolls around in your head. You're always searching for the proper understanding of the Christian faith. And when I came upon this concept from Saint Irenaeus about simply looking for where all the churches agree, that struck me as a methodology. And so I decided to apply that methodology, and then at the same time to go ahead and take a look at one of these early churches just as something to supplement my understanding and to grow into my understanding of Christianity further. And there was this huge church that said Sea of Alexandria on the wall outside. And that's kind of funny because if it had said Coptic Church, I would have had no idea what that meant. But having done a little bit of historical research at the time and been introduced to that early church through a study of how we got our Bible, I understood the Sea of Alexandria to have been the intellectual capital of the church of the world, just as Rome was the political capital. And so I figured this would be a pretty good place to start. And that's what led me to the door anyway. And as far as the things that were attractive, problematic, then that's another issue. But this is what got me walking into the building, and I didn't knowingly ever meet an Orthodox person, much less a Copt, before that. I just decided it's time to go learn about this old church at the same time that I'm studying the historical record, looking for a common voice.
Phil, can you repeat your question so I can make sure that I answer it?
Yeah, no. I was just saying, what about an ancient faith attracted you both to it?
Okay, about the ancient faith itself, um, I have to say, from the first exposure to the ancient faith, the fact that it is ancient, that was something that I had not experienced in my entire life. As a matter of fact, everything that was new and fresh was is what's venerated, you know, especially in the Protestant world, and keep everything fresh. And it was really something to say that a church had been around since the 1970s, you know. But then the fact that there was such a depth to to the ancient faith, and when Thilo started doing research and finding things like the Didache, and really even first wading into the waters, the Lord was leading us through Polycarp and Irenaeus and Ignatius, and it was kind of mind blowing that there the faith was beyond the Bible. That's what attracted me to it.
You know, I remember when doing this research and starting to attend liturgies, I had read about Saint Hippolytus in one of his writings in Rome, who was talking about, he literally quoted the peace be with all and with your spirit, you know, that whole exchange that we have at the beginning of liturgy that was the same as ours, word for word. And it was kind of like, this was 220 AD, you know, I mean, it was shocking. And, you know, let's give thanks to the Lord, it is meet and right. It was literally those words. And I'll say I appreciate the English parishes. I think they're an important, necessary thing for, you know, those who are raised here and for the convert world, although I prefer the ethnic parish. And I especially like midweek liturgy with the elders. But when they go all English, so much that they remove every word. You know, they won't allow a doxapatri, a kainin, a trisegi on him. They won't allow anything. I find that frustrating because for me, voicing the exact same words, tying into this idea of ancient, that I'm voicing the same words in the church that would have been voiced, you know, hundreds and hundreds and even 1500, 1800 years ago, is really, for me, a link of continuity and joining into that community.
Mhm.
And so it means something for me as a convert to be able to join in that continuity of chorus and to be speaking those same words. So I prefer to just leave a little bit in there for us. You know?
Well, so you were saying about the church fathers and kind of the impact that they had on you. So I'm assuming you guys were avid readers of the church fathers prior to finding the church, or no?
No,
Oh,
no,
okay.
it was just this one principle of Catholicity. See, I've never had any substantial formal education.
Okay.
After the eighth grade, actually, you know, even high school, I didn't learn a single thing. And that I came across this precept of Catholicity, and then I'm pretty good at knowing what are the best questions to ask and finding those answers. And so it just began a search for what did the early church say about X, Y, and
Mhm.
Z, and then searching that out. And so starting with the basics of baptism, you know, how does one enter into Christ? Is it through holy baptism, or is it through going forward for an altar call and making a confession? How does one partake of Christ? The whole point of the meeting of the early church, the central focal point being that Eucharist. What is that? Is that juice and crackers to help us remember him? Or is that the body and blood of Christ? Salvation. How does one end up with Christ eternally?
Mhm.
Is it through a moment of believing and saying a prayer, or is it through a life of union with him and growing in him? And so just looking for what the common voice was in various areas I didn't just sit down and read the fathers. I went in with a question and searched out, okay, what is the early church witness on this? And coming to those answers.
Phil, to speak to what you said about studying the church
Sure,
fathers,
sure.
I think that it wasn't until this moment right now, sitting and talking with you, that I remember a little bit before all of this that the Lord in His wisdom, He always moves us. You know,
Sure.
it's rarely a flip of a switch or this epiphany, and He guides us into a direction. And it was prior to you studying about the canon that we were teaching junior high, high school, and college group. And one of the things that we were studying was the letters of Polycarp. And then we started looking at some others. We learned about Felicity and Perpetua, and also about Ignatius. And that's
Fox's Book of Martyrs.
yes, Fox's Book of Martyrs. That really, what Thilo is talking about and what he mentions about Irenaeus and about the church is what took us to the steps of the Church of St. John, Coptic Orthodox Church, for the first time. But you know, the Lord, He's gentle in how He leads you. And that was really when He opened us up to, wow, this goes, the Bible can't contain the church. Like, it's way bigger.
Yeah, sure. No, I appreciate that. I appreciate that. So in the book, you talk about in the book, by the way, if I haven't shown it yet, in your book, you talk about the American viewpoint of an Egyptian mother. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you mean by that?
Tell you.
Well, it seemed, you know, I chose the Coptic Church because once I'd been introduced and kind of become very much leaning towards Orthodoxy, then the question became which flavor of Orthodoxy? Because I'm an American, I can choose any one. I didn't fall in love with an Egyptian girl, so I didn't have to get baptized to be married in the Coptic Church. I could pick any one, and I had seen the various ones. And I chose Coptic, we chose Coptic because for me, one of the major reasons is it was so different than I am. It is so much my opposite. You know, in this consumerist culture, we choose that which fits with us and we like the flavor. I kind of did the opposite because I figured I don't need more of what I already have. I need to supplement what I'm lacking. And the Copts were very much my opposite. And so being the case and kind of entering into that world, I started to really notice and appreciate a lot of things that were very different and to embrace those things. And those raised in the Coptic world kind of just took them for granted, you know, and it's understandably, you know, and so that was that whole article about my viewpoint of an Egyptian mother was like one who was an orphan who was out there. You know, Anastasia once said in the Protestant world, churches were like girlfriends. You know, you have an argument, you leave, and you go down the street, you find another one. And this is like marriage, you know, this is for life. And so kind of being separated and not having that real rooting, you know, the way Copts do, and then finding this mother in the church, we were able to start turning around and we've given a lot of talks. And I always say it's like, I'm just holding up a mirror. I'm just showing you who you are because these are Copts that we're talking to. I'm just showing you what you're about, what your history is, and the depth of the spirituality in front of you. And of course, you know, you grow up in a home and you take things for granted and you look at your parents and, oh, they're just my parents or worse. They're always in my business, always controlling, telling me what to do, you know, and that seems like a real burden to somebody who might be raised in a household. But if you were an orphan who lived out on the street, you'd find this household amazing.
Right.
The food, the care for your wounds, the love, I mean, it would be really something. And that's kind of how I view the church coming in from the outside. And I've said for some time that I feel like my calling, my passion in the church is to convert Copts to Coptic Christianity. you know,
Yeah.
to really kind of from an outsider's point of view, to help expose the depth and beauty and spirituality of the Coptic faith in a way that it's perhaps better appreciated.
Well, I do have a quick follow up. When you mentioned finding the Coptic Church and saying it was the opposite of what you were, kind of, in other words, kind of like what you needed. What did you mean by that?
So it took me quite a few years to try to capture how would I tell somebody what the ethos, the spirit, the life in the Coptic Church is. And then finally it occurred to me, it's here. It's kissing both sides of the hand. And I go to a lot of midweek liturgies, always have, with the elders. And I'm an American. I'm 6 foot, 230, tattoo sleeved, ride a Harley. I have power. You know, I have power face to face. I'm an American. I have power through recourse to the legal system, both criminal and civil. I have rights as an American. Um, and so there's a strength that, well, I'll call it a strength that we have, you know, and that I had. And these Egyptian elders who would come into this liturgy with their head down and kiss both sides of the hand, they never had these kinds of powers. And so they learned to cling to God in true humility. And they mean it. When they kiss both sides of the hand, it's not just an automatic cultural gesture. They mean it. Like they literally thank God for the good and the bad, for what they receive and what they don't receive. And they accept it all as though coming from the hand of God. And this kind of humility and gratitude and acquiescence to the will of God and submission to all things that come in their direction. This is so opposite of my strength and pride as an American that I knew I needed this badly. And this is the spirit of the early church. Because what was the early church? Was it not a small, persecuted Middle Eastern religious minority? Well, thanks to the Muslims, largely, you know, the Copts have remained in that same scenario on and off pretty much ever since. And I believe it has served to maintain that spirit within the Copts and especially within the elders. And I'll always go back to the elders, because
Sure.
I think there are things formed in the elders that cannot be formed outside of that suffering situation and that oppressive situation, that kind of clinging to God. And, you know, by the way, I really believe there are two things that will make a person cling to God, really cling to Him. One is suffering. I mean, when you think about it, when you're really sick, when you're really hurt, when you're really emotionally distraught, those are the times we really cling to God the most. And the other is being absolutely convinced this is simply true. And my eternal destiny hinges on my response to it. And that being the case, that suffering is not going to be experienced here in America by those born or raised here. And there may be other things that are obtained here in the West that are very important and perhaps more important in the West. But that sort of humility and deep faith and clinging to God is something that is just so deep within the ethos of the elders. And I needed a lot more of that.
Yeah. Feel free. Sorry, I
Oh,
cut you
no,
off earlier.
was that responsive to your
Oh
question?
yeah, yeah. Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay.
Um, so, what are some of the challenges you both faced integrating into this Coptic, Egyptian, ancient faith?
A lot.
Okay. Yeah.
A
Feel
lot.
free.
I would say right out of the gate, um, walking into the church for myself was seeing people kissing the priest's hand. That I was like, yeah, no, that's not going to happen. And then seeing people, and it was like very sparse when we got when we arrived there, or when I arrived there the first time, on time for
Right.
liturgy, 8 o'clock in the morning.
We didn't know better. Sorry.
You're supposed to arrive, after the gospel. But to see, people standing in front of icons praying, that was very odd. How ornate it was, how not trendy the church was. I mean, it was beautiful, but it was just friction for me. And then definitely the length of the liturgy. It just, when you have no landmarks, it seems to go on forever. And then okay, you're standing, and now we're sitting, and now we're standing again, and it's like, oh, okay, now everybody has their head down, so I have my head down, and then it's like, well, I've had my head down for a really long time, and I look up and everybody's standing. Oh, I guess we're standing again. That was really, really rough. Now, it's nothing that I would recommend anybody who's listening to say, oh, we're hearing it right from their mouths. They came in, and we need to fix this, we need to change this, we need the services to be shorter, we need greeters. Don't, because all of the discomfort was on my part. But then when I learned, again, the depth, your first question, Phil,
Right.
The depth of what was happening and the meaning behind everything, it was for me to change to it, to conform to it, not for it to conform to me. But those were some of the things, and of course saints. These things that are just not, oh, we do them differently in the Protestant world. It is the antithesis of what we do in the Protestant world. And we're literally taught that all of these things are bad.
Right.
So it's not just like, oh, got to get used to Egyptian culture and everybody trying to overfeed you and stuff.
Yeah, I'd say that, it's kind of.
What were you going to say,
No,
Phil? Hold on.
no, it's okay. It's okay. Go for it.
Okay.
I have
I
plenty of
would say it's
questions.
kind of important to, when we look at these challenges, to classify them in two categories. So one is just as an American adult, and we're talking about the standing for a long time, the fasting and things. These are things that you work your way into at such an early stage of life that they're just fluid parts of your life that you really don't think about as a cradle Copt, and they're kind of stark as a convert. By the way, just as an aside, a word to any priests: keep the requirements lower than you might think for a convert, because what they will be able to do at the beginning of all this with the zeal of conversion, when that fades, you may find that now I have to go backwards in my practices. So, keep it small and then work the way up. So there are things as an American that, Anastasia was mentioning, but then there are other things as a Protestant. And the well has been poisoned. And even though we're something of an anomaly in the Coptic Church, I have a lot of friends from Eastern Orthodox churches, which have very large convert communities
Sure.
who are studying converts. I call it Marian and studying.
Yeah.
And the ones who studied their way in, same issues as us, because generally they're going to be the more zealous Protestants who are seeking something richer and deeper and more profound and are sensing there's more to this faith. They tend to make up that constituency of conversion. And it's the same icons, intercessions of the saints, ever virginity of St. Mary, the priesthood and mediating, confession, So all of these things tend to be common. And it would be easier, I honestly believe, it would be so much better if you had no religious knowledge at all and walked in, because there are so many things that would just intuitively resonate in you that now the well has been poisoned. And so, icons, oh no, where if you had no religious awareness, you would go in and see that, oh, this is beautiful. Oh,
Right.
this is meaningful and deep, all these things. So it's like taking a sheet of paper full of writing and having to erase a bunch of it and rewrite versus a blank page, which would be much easier to fill with writing. And so I think understanding it on both levels, just as an adult American and then as a Protestant. But honestly, I can't stress this enough. Trying to copy something about the evangelical world to make it our church more appealing, this competing for customers with a consumerist mindset so you can get your trophy converts and say, look, no. If you just look at the Orthodox churches that have been very successful in evangelizing, the Antiochians, even the OCA, they didn't do it that way. They did it by being unashamedly Orthodox, by being very zealous for the ancient traditions and the holiness, not being seeker sensitive, not being market driven and appealing, but by being what the church was, sacred and holy and solemn. This is the thing they're looking for. Because all those other things you can get in the culture and society. Oh, we have a great band with lights and a smoke machine. What, you don't think the culture has better concerts than this? Oh, we have this moving, interesting, exciting speaker. Well, good grief, you don't think the culture has better speakers than we have? So trying to copy this and offer a cheesy knockoff of what the culture already has is not the direction to go. The best direction that I've seen, and this is borne out by the conversion rates and the others, is to be unashamedly Orthodox, because that we offer, they can't get anywhere else.
Yeah, I love that answer. I did want to ask, how long did it take for you both to get used to those kissing the priest's hand and, the intercession of saints? I mean, I don't know, kissing the icons and things like that. I mean, how long did it take for you guys to get over that shock, I guess you could say?
You have to tell.
No.
No? You don't have
No. There was a story he's asking me to share, and I'm refusing.
okay. No worries, no worries.
Again, gradual. Everything was on a spectrum, and it's hard to say at what time or what moment I warmed up. I think Saint Mary was the one that took the longest for me, because I think she's the one that was beat into my head the most. Like, she's no different than anybody else, and we don't venerate her, and the Catholics worship her, and all of the bad stuff, like
Right,
Thilo said, the poison
right,
well.
right.
But it kind of sloughed off and fell away, and it was like light coming through darkness, to be honest, like dawn, like watching the sunrise in the morning. It's like, well, I love doing that. I sit and watch the sunrise, and you look and you're like, okay, the sky's black, but is it navy blue now? Is it dark
Right.
blue? And then all of a sudden there it is, and it's hard to say what moment that happened.
Okay.
Of
That's
the
great.
various things, they kind of happen at different times. I know from the moment I walked in and no one was facing me, nobody greeted me, everybody was looking and facing the altar, and so was the priest. And I wasn't a consumer anymore. And God was the clear center of attention at the altar. That I loved from the first moment. And then I remember one of the earliest ones was, again, I'm doing my historical research. Oh, Tertullian, 202 AD, talking about the sign of the cross and making the sign of the cross. With him, it was on your forehead, I believe, with your thumb. But seeing it was that early, I said, well, this isn't a Catholic practice. This is a Christian practice that goes back to the beginning. So I'm going to try doing this. And I'll tell you, it was like when my Labrador, who was afraid of water, entered into the water for the first time and became a Labrador. She was so afraid of it and just took to it like, this is where I belong,
Right.
because that's where Labradors do belong. And it was like that when I made the sign of the cross. And other things took much longer, but there was one key turning point for everything, and that was in the understanding of the incarnation and what that meant about what the church is. And this is like one of the drums I beat a lot of the time, which is when a question comes up, there tend to be two very common camps in the church. The one says, well, what did Uncle say? And whatever Uncle said, of course, is the dogmatic truth, no matter what the question, especially if Uncle was a doctor, forget it. 'Cause that there's no more question what Uncle said. And the other is, oh my gosh, I like it this way. I think we should do it this way because it makes me feel good. And I want to kind of see if I can reorient some people when a question comes up to say, what has the church said? Has the church spoken to this matter or to a parallel matter where I can apply a principle? And so once you see the church and she becomes your mother and you see this presence of the Spirit in the church for 2 millennia, then everything else fell into place from that point. And it just became very simply, well, if I disagree with whatever the church has said about this, I'm obviously wrong and I need to go back and gain an understanding. So that's when you come down from the place of being a critic and a judge of the church and become her child. And everybody has to do this. And it's right that an inquirer be a judge over the church. She's asking you to entrust your eternal well-being into her hands. And she better measure up, before you're going to do something like that. But when that time comes and through the incarnation, you see this is the body of Christ and what that really means. And this is the place where Christ said he would send his Spirit and what that really means. And where you find that universal voice speaking together, you also need to understand the utter arrogance of saying, well, nobody understood it until my guy in 1500, 1600, 1700, 1900. Like, what did that guy have that was so special that exceeded the sum total of all those people? So I don't know. I know I went way off beyond what you were asking, but I just
No, guys. We're here to listen to you.
Phil, can I share a little bit of
Sure,
a story with you? So your question was
sure,
like,
sure,
when did that
sure,
change, right? Those things that were difficult.
sure.
Um, I have to say that something that made it a challenge to come into the Orthodox Church, and then something that's been a challenge ever since then, with my own faith, is realizing almost everything that I did for 30 years or 40 years as a Protestant, um, is literally the opposite of what the church, what Christ taught, the disciples preached, and the church kept. It's literally the opposite. When we talk about salvation, when we talk about ourselves, when we talk about whether or not you just you say a prayer and you trust Christ and everything is done and there's no struggling and there's no battle and there's no war to be overcome. Every single thing. And so entering in, it was a lot more stark. Like we've said, there's only one man between, or there's only one between God and man, that's Christ Jesus alone. So there's no priest, and that icons are evil, and Saint Mary, everything. It's like it was literally the opposite, and it was very stark and in your face at that point in time. But then as we started to get into the theology of it, and even the ethos, and even the mindset of the smallness of who, in order to be healed and to be in the image that we were created, that we're to become small. So even what we're doing here is kind of the antithesis of it, because this would be honestly more Protestant, of like, oh, I have a book and let me go do a tour about it and let me tell everybody, and what are more ways that we can elevate ourselves and get this out there. That's literally the opposite of our ethos. So even like up into this week, God is like showing me things that were backwards thinking. And there was something that Thilo said a long time ago, long time ago, about heaven being the upside down kingdom. And because everything is the exact opposite what you would think. If you want to be the greatest, you have to be the least. If you want to be the conqueror, you have to, humble yourself. All of these things is the upside down kingdom. And I had the realization most recently that even that God revealed to me that idea was arrogance. To think that the kingdom of heaven is what is upside down and not myself. And so it's it is an ongoing, when we were asked about the book and asked to write the book, I'm like, I'm not done. I'm not done until Abuna prays over me that the Lord would receive his servant. When I'm done and I'm in the casket, then I can tell you. But I'm still learning. I'm still overcoming a lot of stuff and so ignorant.
The tools that the church gives us are both descriptive and prescriptive, and those are tough, coming from the Protestant background. You're told to pray as a Protestant, and you pray, but when somebody says this is what you're going to pray and how often you're going to pray, then you realize I can't give my attention to God for 15 minutes to 10 minutes, when you have to go confess your sins, the same ones over and over and over.
Right.
These things are harsh and humiliating, and they expose my broken state right back at me. And in that way, they're descriptive and show me who I am, and it's not pretty. And then they're prescriptive. In doing these things, we help to overcome so many things, or to grow, at least. Maybe we don't want to overcome them, but to grow in so many ways through these practices. That it's rough, and you don't expect it, especially from a Protestant background. Everything was done at the cross, is what we kept being told. It's finished. That's why he said it's finished.
Right.
And so, everything's been accomplished and done. And especially when you went up and said your prayer, now it's done and heaven is secured. And now there's just so much, standing in liturgy. And for, as long as our liturgies are. Now I realize I can't give my attention to God for very long, and where my mind wanders, and how I'm thinking about food, and all these things that it brings up and puts in front of me about who I am. That's rough, coming in from the outside.
Thanks for indulging us in that.
No.
Phil.
Oh, I can't tell you how much I personally learned. We're not even done yet, so I appreciate it. The more, the better. I think we're all learning, and we're all being blessed right now. So, in the book, you mentioned the impact your parish priest, Father Daniel Habib, had on you both. So, what's some advice that you can give to maybe the parish fathers and their communities in receiving evangelicals into the church?
We were very fortunate to have him. And I don't just say that flippantly, because I've known many priests, and wonderful priests, but would not have rooted us in Orthodoxy the same way he did. I once, when I was at St. Macarius Monastery in Egypt, they asked me to give a talk to a room full of monks, like 18 of them. And at the end of the talk, because they then asked me questions, and one of the younger monks said, "You're very Orthodox." And that was because of Father Daniel. And so the thing I would say is, first of all, be unabashedly Orthodox. Don't apologize for it. Don't try to sugarcoat it or change it. Be upfront about things. We aren't salesmen. This isn't a product. Get out of the American consumerist mindset and forget about this trophy convert thing. If you think this person and the churches in your community are not a match, and they're going to be alienated culturally, connect them with the Antiochian parish or some other parish. Is the goal to have a trophy convert, to gain a new tither, or is the goal to get somebody united to Christ? And if the goal is to unite somebody to Christ, then you should say, okay, where can we confirm Christ is? And where is the best place for them to play out their salvation, to grow in this process? Which is the best environment for that, for this person? So I think that is huge. And another one is, don't be too quick to baptize. We were of the understanding, and still are, that we will be held accountable for the light we are given. And so if we are given baptism and given the fullness of the church, that judgment is going to be according to that standard. And that's a much higher standard. It's tough. And so don't get them in and baptize them too quickly, because if they fall away, they're going to be, I believe, in worse condition than if they had never been baptized in the first place. So there's no rush to this. A minimum of a year of catechesis. You have to, it's not just believing the right set of facts anymore. It's not just acknowledging the right truth, but can I live this? Can I live the life of this church? And that can only be known through experience, through living it, through the Sunday liturgies and the feast and fast seasons, and at least a year to go through this. So don't be in a hurry. Don't sugarcoat or try to make orthodoxy more appealing. You're not a salesman. Be upfront about it. There are some things here that are really tough, and there are some things that are really painful. And, these are the struggles and obstacles you're going to go through. And just be honest with them.
I have three very practical things.
Sure.
But 100% serious, and I have a feeling there are things that people would laugh and dismiss because they're looking for something hard. These are simple but so important. Okay. That is number one, your website, for the church's website. Make sure that it is up to date. Make sure that if there is a change in the liturgy time, make sure if there is Bible studies, if there's phone numbers to contact, how to contact the church, that everything is functioning. Because seriously, like, we laugh about it now because we know the Egyptian culture, but if I am curious and I want to go to visit your church and I see, okay, liturgy starts at 8 o'clock and I show up and I wait 15, 20, 30 minutes and no one shows up. Oh, well, that's because it's different because there was a feast day that happened yesterday. And everybody in the community, church community, knows that. But I don't know it. I'm not part of the community. And I've had things where I've called the phone number that's on the website, and it's been pretty important because I really wanted to talk to a priest, and it's been out of my area, and left multiple messages and got no return call. And again, in the Egyptian community, we laugh and like, oh, that's not unusual, but it is unusual in the
Common society.
in the common society. And it can not only be a hindrance, but it can be hurtful and be like, I'm never going to look into that again. Okay, so
how many times did I, during my inquiry period, and it started during a Lent, and so I would go attend these liturgies and I'd go midweek. How many times did I show up according to the website, the time, and it was like I'd show up at 9 and it wasn't till noon. Mm-hmm. Or I show up at noon and it was at 9. And I would drive all the way there and go in to find out I had missed it. Mm-hmm. Or went into the church, nobody's here. And I leave and I find out, oh, they were in the little church right over there, across the driveway. Wow. And I didn't even know that. Right. I mean, so this sounds minor, but this was a frustrating issue.
So number one, website, very, very important, not to be minimized. Number two is have someone that can walk someone through the liturgy. If you see people coming in and they have deer in the headlights and they don't know what to do, I can tell you, I would have not gone a second time if it had not been for Mariam, who had come and sat with me. And she explained everything and told me the significance. She helped me when to stand, when to sit. I again, and then we had people after her that continued this process for actually weeks or months, different people that sat with us and answered different questions for us.
In keeping with that, I would hear a lot, and I do hear a lot, about the alienating nature of this cultural church to the outsider. Sure. And I see people trying to change the whole culture in a church. These are elder Egyptians. You're not going to change their culture. You out of your mind. These people are, they're being set in their ways and not budging is why you're not a Muslim today. Like, this is part of that whole ethos that preserved the church. So, this idea that we're going to change the whole culture. No, it only takes a few people in any parish to make the outsider feel welcome. That's all it takes. You don't have to change the whole, you just be that person. and go sit with them, invite them to lunch after, answer their questions. It only takes a couple to make you no longer feel alienated.
And that was something that Abuna Daniel Habib had set up
Right.
at St. John, was on the website. If you are a visitor and you would like some help, going through the liturgy, he said call or text, and he did respond. And then that's why he was able to set us up with somebody. So again, website, have somebody walk through liturgy. You don't need a new program. You don't need ushers. You don't need name tags. You don't need, just like he said, just like keep it simple. Just like somebody to come sit with you. And then finally, the third thing is, let's say that the person is an inquirer and then is moving into becoming a catechumen. They're warming up to them. There's moving in this direction. What that typically looks like is now, as I'm becoming a little bit more than an inquirer, is I'm entering into the practice of the church. I'm not baptized or anything yet, but I'm celebrating Christmas on January 7th with you, and I'm attending the Easter service 2 weeks before or after everybody else's Easter.
Sure.
But remember that I don't have the community that you have. The rest of my family has already celebrated. And so when we were welcomed by the abunas or by people to say, come to our house, like come have the feast with us. A ton of people we didn't know, but it was like 20, 30 Egyptians and this like food as far as the eye could see, and so much warmth, and it made us feel like part of it. Don't forget that we're coming in and we don't have that community, and you're the only link to that community. So
that is so big.
So the three things are the website, walk through liturgy, and to welcome on feasts. So
Yeah.
even alliteration there. You got the three W's, right? Website, welcome, and then so
yeah. When Father Daniel invited us to his house, I mean, and his family and his friends were there for major feasts, and then at the parish we are now, Abuna Joseph did the same. I can't tell you what that means, and because I mean, if you think about it, you've been fasting for 40 days, 55 days, preparing for this event. And now it's the big feast day, and you go to that liturgy, and it ends at 12:30, and you go home alone.
Right. And most likely you don't even take communion because you're not baptized yet. But you're entering into the fasting.
And even if you do and you are baptized, here's the peak, the celebration, and you go home, and there's nobody there to celebrate it with you. I can't begin to emphasize how right she is there, that this is probably one of the biggest things that will make a person feel like part of the community.
Yeah.
I want to ask, how do you guys overcome those things? I mean, is it just, because those are kind of difficult things to go through, especially, it's a feast day and I fasted 55 days. It's my first time ever. And then everyone's hanging out and I'm just there. I mean, were those experiences that you had, and then how'd you guys keep going?
Sometimes we experienced it, not all the time, but many times different priests invited us over. And Thilo, it's like he's always going to be up in the middle of it, like going at the Abuna with theology. So we typically ended up as
there's a hierarchy of things I was seeking from the church, and the first one was God. Okay, so nobody welcomes me, nobody smiles, nothing. God's still there. So that's the first order of importance, and he's there. The next one is the ethos of the Coptic faith, and that I believe is largely, again, found in the elders, but in the whole church. And that is something that is absorbed slowly over time. It's not learned. And so, again, if nobody smiled, nobody welcomed me, it wouldn't matter because I'm still absorbing that, just being with them in their presence. So again, that's my next level of importance, and I can get that without any friends or anybody welcoming. I remember it was 2 or 3 years in. So I've always been one that attends many midweek liturgies, and the old Egyptian women with that stone face, like they don't even smile at each other.
I'm not familiar. No.
And they don't even smile at each other. They don't smile at anybody.
Okay.
2 or 3 years in, he started smiling at me at midweek liturgy. And I was like, I'm riding up on a Harley wearing a t-shirt and jeans, and I got tattoo sleeves. And these old Egyptian people are smiling at me. But I really have an affinity for Moses the Black, because if you look at the abuse he went through, um, with the name calling and the treatment of him, but it was very much, this is kind of Egyptian culture and you're the outsider. But he continued forward in humility and dedication. And the Egyptians turned and they changed. And they said, you know what? Not only are you one of us, now he's one of the most revered saints in the whole church, because he faced this with dedication to God and humility. So I'm still going to learn from you. I'm still going to receive what you have. Call me whatever you want. I'm still going to get what you have to offer. And they came to embrace and love him and honor and revere him. And again, he's one of the major saints. So I feel a great affinity for that this is how I feel about the elders. Now, I'm at a parish down the street 2 days a week, and at mine on Friday and Sunday. And it's all old people if you go on Tuesday and Wednesday, and they all smile and they're all so warm, but not from day one. This isn't, again, the consumerist sales evangelical world where everybody's trained to be welcoming, give good customer service. This isn't that world. But when they do finally embrace you, it means a whole lot more than that greeter who was taught how to smile and give you the good word. And, it really means something.
Well, so that actually leads up to the next question, which is, what advice do you have for evangelicals who might be watching and considering Orthodoxy something completely new to them?
Read my book.
That is his advice. There you go.
Honestly, I think so. There are those who are seeking, okay, and if you're seeking understanding, because you might want to go this direction,
Sure.
then I honestly would start them probably with Father Damick's book, Orthodoxy and Heterodoxy, which gives them a thumbnail view of church history from the beginning and the various groups. And what it basically does is it demystifies it. Mm-hmm. It shows the influences that cause the various issues and schisms to erupt. And so it kind of, okay, now this all makes sense and you understand it from a historical perspective. And then I honestly do believe my book is very useful, because I think I go into, and I've heard this from many, an unpacking and a comparison between the two approaches towards spirituality and how different they are in such a way that it again helps them to understand and demystify the whole thing. Mm-hmm. Beyond that, just slow down, be patient. This is not a sprint. This is a marathon. Relax into it. This is going to take some time. And just keep asking questions. And find a few good people to help direct you to resources to get the answers to those questions. Most everything I learned wasn't from a book. It was from an article or a chapter in a book that addressed the question. So start with your questions, and then you keep pursuing your questions. And you can usually find some pretty concise answers out there.
Anastasia, how about you?
I actually have opportunities to talk to my Protestant friends quite a bit. And Thilo has this thing that he asks about, if someone asks how to get to our house, how would you tell them to get here? And everyone always just saying things, well, it depends on where you're coming from. So that is the first answer to your question, Phil, is like, well, what would you say to help a Protestant? Well, it depends on where they're coming from. What is their question and what is their stumbling point?
Sure.
Typically, tradition is a stumbling point. It's like, well, do you trust tradition more than the Bible? What the church says, is like, does that dictate how you read the Bible? So I typically start with asking the question, something that would be intuitive to you as a Copt, but to my Protestant friends, it's not, is I ask, how did St. John die. And all my Protestant friends know that he was on the island of Patmos and, died there, even though he was tried to be martyred a number of times. Okay, how did St. Paul die? Well, he was beheaded. Okay, how did St. Peter die? Well, he was crucified upside down. Okay, so we got those. And we know that the Bible is 100% trustworthy because these men went to their death never recanting their testimony, right? So we're all on the same page. That's why we know that we can trust the Bible. Yes, 100%. None of those things are in the Bible. I had my friend drop her jaw just the other day saying, that's not in the Bible. No, not St. John, St. Peter, they're like, no, their martyrdoms are not in the Bible. And you're saying that that's the very reason you can trust the Bible. So what you're saying is tradition.
Right.
There's a tradition that is telling you, that is undergirding your belief in the reliability of Scripture. So it's just these minor things that when Thilo says slowly, seriously, you have to go slowly. That page that he said that has all the writing on it and it has to be erased. I can't come in and then go, okay, and then there was Irenaeus, and then there was Ignatius, and then there was like, because just that part, the fact that they didn't realize that they were trusting tradition is going to take them a minute because it was just like, just absolutely mind blown. One more example, if I may, is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. One more example is I had a very dear friend that was like, well, you guys believe that you're saved by your works and that works play into your salvation. And, Christ did everything. It's nothing that we did. Okay. So then I asked her, it's like, even our very belief of us calling on him was like from him. That's the Protestant view. Okay. I asked her, is it true that if you believe that if you confess with your mouth Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved? She said, absolutely. And I said, those are works. And then she said, well, that's different because you guys believe that it has to be a lot of works. And I said, you just changed the playing field. It was either absolutely no works whatsoever, and now you've moved into, there is something. You need to confess with your mouth and believe in your heart. So we just moved it over at least into one work. So let's talk about that.
Will you be forgiven if you don't forgive?
So again, it was just mind blown that she was 100%. If you confess with it, that is a work. That is something that you have to do, even if it's absolutely minimal. And so again, we just gotta ease people in to understand, listen, you already have the truth in you and you already know the truth. It's just, it's been twisted.
As I understand it, in the brain, you literally can't accept contrary information without a whole process that you have to go through in order to make it palatable. As I talk to atheists, I say, listen, I'll be honest with you, I can't give atheism a fair hearing. Because if it's true, there is no ultimate meaning and purpose in all of this. And that's a reality I couldn't live with. And so because I can't give it a fair hearing. Even, I'm just being transparent.
Sure.
So understand that there's a whole bunch of stuff you won't see that's required for somebody to be able to change. You've got to create a scenario, where this new belief and information can be accepted. And one of the huge issues is, but what are my experiences with God? And there's a presumption I have to therefore deny those experiences were God if that wasn't really the church. And you're asking somebody to deny very profound experiences they may have had with the divine. I couldn't have done that. I had to find a scenario in which I could harmonize all of this without denying those experiences I'd had before.
So there's a simple answer for you, Phil. You got this? You ready to go proselytize now?
We're hoping that all the evangelicals watching right now digest everything. But no, that's great. I only have two more questions. I promise we'll be expedient. I know your time is valuable, but what's next for you both? In terms of the Agora University Press and just any other types of services or a benefit for the community. Like, what's next? Do you have anything you're working on in the future?
subdeacon ordination,
Oh,
tentatively on December 22nd. I passed the test and finally have become somewhat competent at deacon responses, which was probably the hardest thing I've ever had to do, was learn those, because I have zero aptitude. And I mean,
sure.
I can't convey how zero my aptitude is for learning those. And so other than that, it's just going to liturgy. I when things come up, I do them. You know, if I see a need, I'll step in. But I really don't have any plans at this time. There are some things that people have suggested. Professor Wingert wanted me to write a book with just various thoughts on various topics that, you know, and maybe, you know, maybe that'll happen. But right now, just praying the liturgy during the week, finding peace so I can live in this world of madness, and getting ready for this subdeacon ordination.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Anastasia, how about yourself?
We are supposed to pray Agbeya tonight.
Yes.
And then we have the Fast of the Nativity coming up, so that's
We have liturgy in the morning.
we have liturgy in the morning.
Gotta get there early and set up.
So that's about as
Before
far
the
in advance.
gospel or after?
before the priest typically.
Yes. Yeah,
Sounds
typically I'm there before the priest,
good. Good for you.
which
Good.
isn't saying
That's
much
awesome.
in the Coptic church, but
That's very impressive still. All right, final question, last question. Both of you guys. If you could host a webinar with any of the church fathers, who would it be?
I was in a class one time in the Protestant church where they asked, if you could ask Jesus any question, what would you ask? And I sat and I had to chew on that question, because that's a pretty profound question. And
Okay.
after I chewed on it a little while, I said, you know, I'm not smart enough to know what to ask. So I would ask him, tell me what you want me to know, because that would be a smarter answer.
Okay.
And then I realized he's just going to tell me something he's already said 100 times. He's just going to tell me, love God and love your neighbor, forgive others. He's going to talk about humility. He's not going to tell me something he hasn't said. So I kind of feel that way at this particular moment in my life. I really don't have any questions. I just have a woeful lack of living the things that I already understand. So I just pass. No, I don't want to do a webinar. I'm over here trying to focus during liturgy and pray the Agbeya. And, you know, there are seasons when I have questions and I do, you know, dig in. But any of the church fathers' answers they'd have for any of my questions, they'd probably already said. And which church father I'd turn to depends on the question, you know? And so.
Well, let me modify. Who is your favorite church father or mother? I mean, or saint, or
Like, work with me here.
work with me.
Saint
Anything. Do you have a
Jesus,
favorite?
Saint Jesus. I don't,
Jesus.
I don't know. Probably Saint Paul. I don't know, because I really appreciate the different aspects of each of them.
Sure.
So when you say who's my favorite, it's like regarding what when it comes to you know humility, Saint Marina, you know, Saint Macarius, you know, when it comes to an intelligent articulation and conveyance of my faith to others, St. Paul.
Tenacity, St. George.
Yeah. I mean, so again, it's like, you know, what's my favorite movie? Well, if it's a comedy, if it's a drama, if it's a crime story, you know, that's going to change. So I really kind of don't have a favorite one so much as the turn tos that the church has given me for various things. I'm sorry if that's an inadequate answer.
No. I mean, I'm hoping Anastasia maybe has a favorite that maybe she could, enlighten us on.
It's, oh my gosh, I'm gonna get all super spiritual here on you. I can't sit amongst the saints who are all amazing and say this one or that one is my favorite. Like they're people, you know. It's like if you were with your group of friends and someone's like, which one is your favorite friend? I mean,
Yeah.
you know, really.
Good point.
Yeah, it's I love them all, and I'm so humbled that they let me be their friend, you know, and I'm it's hard to even be in their presence just because, you know, how much they achieved in their lifetime, and I'm so small at their feet, and they would probably tell me that not to compare myself to them. But I when you said the webinar question, I remember, are you familiar with Elder Thaddeus, Our Thoughts Determine Our Lives?
Yeah,
That book?
I actually
Okay.
am. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Now, Elder Thaddeus was recent enough that there are videos of him and interviews with him. And I remember watching the interview, and I just was so frustrated with the man interviewing him. I'm like, would you please just shut up? Like the questions, the inane questions he was asking Elder Thaddeus, and it's just to sit and listen to Elder Thaddeus. Like even if he just, when you watched him and he just kind of drifted off, you could tell that even in his drifting off, he was in the presence of the Lord. And it would like I would just want to just sit there and be like, okay, what is going on in his head? Just sit there with him silently. But of course, we can't do that on video. You got to ask some inane question of like, if you were a tree, what kind of tree would you be? You know, so it's just like just um, I would not do a webinar. I would sit and listen. It would be the worst webinar ever. And I love all of the saints, and I'm honored that they let me call them friend.
You know, at this
What
stage,
were you
I'm
gonna
a,
say, Phil?
I was going to say, lesson learned, no favorites questions anymore. Where I'll stay away
you
from
know,
that.
at this particular stage, I'm attending a lot of liturgies. Like that's where my spiritual life is largely being fed, midweek liturgies and so on. And not, it was last Lent, I read the book on Pope Perilous.
Sure.
Mm.
And, you know, and before that, all I'd heard about was the miracle worker and all the miracles. And I'm reading this, I'm like, is liturgy, it was prayer that was the central focal point of his life. And so since then, I really kind of have an attention to him and kind of a connecting to his spirit and why he wanted to just be there in the house of the Lord in prayer as I'm attending so many liturgies, but that's this current season in my life. So I think those things can change seasonally with which one is kind of connecting with where you
Sure.
are.
Sure. That's great. Well, I appreciate the answer. And let me tell you, I've been so blessed. And we're a little bit over time, so I apologize to everyone. I apologize to you both as well. But I personally, I've been so blessed. Blessing to be in your presence, and we really enjoyed this time. I want to encourage everyone to purchase My American Flight to Egypt. Okay, available on Amazon. My American Flight to Egypt. Great, great, great read. Written by great, great, great people. So again, thank you so much for being with us today, and thank you to all those who participated in this webinar. Thanks again. Until next time.
Thank you
Thank
for
you,
having us.
Phil. Thanks, everyone.
Awesome. Take care. God bless.
Bye.